Alibaba, they took offense, and it was not intentional. They took offense that, well, your CEO is in our country. Why were we not prioritized? .com bubble, oh boy. I think it was early 2000. All of a sudden, that pattern changed and things became very chaotic. I think I know a lot of things. I don't. I said to myself, I am going to cash out at this moment and see what happens.
Hi, this is Amy. Welcome to Stella and Amy's podcast.
Hi, this is Stella.
Today we have a guest. His name is Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Chen. Nice to be joining this podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have Jeff here. This is also our second English podcast. Today we have the special guest, Jeff Chen. Jeff has 30 years of experience in tech, and he covered a broad range of industries from semiconductors, security, education tech, and AI, and also has taken on roles engineer, sales, product marketing, and also strategy. Jeff also spent his last decade in education, focusing on AI strategies and also technology solutions for higher education. So Jeff and I met at ASU and GSV Summit in 2024. This conference, ASU and GSV Summit, is one of or the biggest annual education technology conference, and it is co-hosted by Arizona State University and Global Silicon Valley Ventures. If the conference sounds unfamiliar to you, remember earlier in the year when Education Secretary Linda McMahon confused AI with A1 during a panel discussion at a conference?
That's the conference.
That happened at ASU and GSV Summit.
Were you both there in that panel?
Gosh.
We missed fun this year.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I sure heard about it.
I'm not sure if I'll catch it if I'm there because it's hard to believe.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I have been in education tech, or ed tech for short, for over 2 years now. And I still feel somewhat new to this space. And I've always wanted to find someone to come onto our podcast to talk to us about this amazing space. Today we have Jeff here. And welcome again, Jeff.
Yeah, happy to be here and have this conversation with you, Stella and Amy. Yeah, fire away. What can I tell you?
Let's jump into education tech right away. So Jeff, can you maybe talk us through the big players in AI and technology in education, especially in higher education?
Sure. I think, in higher education, it's important to kind of know how things work. So there are universities and systems, and you have the CIOs offices and then provosts and strategic offices as well. For me, coming from industry, working with higher ed, there was definitely a lot of learning in how you engage universities, how decisions are made, which usually is pretty decentralized because you also have the concept of academic freedom for the faculty members and shared governance, so between the faculty and administration. So there's usually not a straight line to a decision, and the sales cycle tend to be longer, and you have to be patient and you have to focus on relationships. Just understand how things move from proof of concept to scaling campus-wide. It is quite an undertaking. First step is understanding that structure. And it varies between different entities. Something like a research university like ASU would be different than a smaller liberal arts school, and yet different from community college and technical college. So there was definitely a lot for us to learn. When I joined HP, we were just entering higher education as a strategic area. The on-ramp to that was a little bit humbling and definitely a lot of learning.
What kind of product offering or services does HP provide for higher ed?
Yeah, just to explain to the audience, I recently left HP, so I'm not speaking for HP, but definitely reflecting on my experience. HP has a very broad portfolio. So when I was on the worldwide education team, we were responsible for increasing the market share for PC, various types of PC that were being used on campus, whether it's back office for administration, front office, students, faculty, research, what have you. So that covers the gamut. You could be Chromebooks, professional Chromebooks, could be Windows devices, powerful mobile laptops with NVIDIA or AMD GPUs, all the way to large workstations for research that has multiple, really large commercial GPUs for doing language model research, for example, or other AI tasks. So for us, although we were hosted under the personal system side, we were also responsible for promoting the entire portfolio, including services, print devices, and HP printer is significant business, inkjet, laserjet, what have you, industrial press even, or also 3D printers. So a wide range of devices. So my job on the worldwide education team was to focus on engaging higher education customers, understanding their challenges, and then mapping their needs to our solutions. And then through a collaborative engagement, we may do applied research, and we bring in a third party like EDUCAUSE, which is a very big player, the largest nonprofit for the advancement of IT in higher ed. So we would work with them, and we would do a lot of interesting programs to create opportunity to learn together with universities. And then we would publish white papers to share back to the community. So kind of creating a virtuous cycle. So higher education sales is definitely not one step. Even if you have some relationships, you have to be prepared to do the things that I mentioned. Really engage the community and be willing to help them demonstrate how technology benefits their constituency. Then you have earned the right to talk about scaling from a proof of concept to something significant. So that was definitely one of the key learnings I came away with.
Jeff, you mentioned the sales cycle in the world of education or higher ed can be very long. How long are you talking about here?
It could be several years. You build a relationship, and then when opportunity comes, people remember your contribution in your relationship and kind of make yourself avail yourself to the opportunity. They do get bombarded by vendors, and we often hear, definitely don't call us, we'll call you. But if you do invest time and expertise, they do very much like to collaborate with industry, but it has to be kind of shared value, not just one way taking an order. So it could be less than a year. I think that's kind of rare, or maybe just for smaller purchases. But if you're hoping to do something significant, you have to look into investing several years.
Yeah, I would imagine schools don't buy computers and printers every year.
Yeah, there's definitely a replacement cycle. They go by, maybe 4 or 5 years, depends on what their budget situation is. But not everything is synchronized. So in a lot of universities, the individual colleges make their own decisions. Maybe sometimes in collaboration with central IT, they still have some autonomy. So you could definitely build relationships and find opportunities. It's not like, every 4 years, for example, a lot of things could be happening in between. You just have to be really in there and be contributing and cultivating these relationships, because they do have a lot of choices, right? And many users don't distinguish one brand from another. It's all commodity to them. But if you have a relationship, if you have, for example, you were willing to bring an expert to an event that they're hosting, that is a great way to demonstrate your company has the expertise, and that creates value for you later when they are making purchase decision. They do remember, maybe I have the choice between 3 vendors and they all roughly the same to me. I'd rather give the business to someone I have a relationship with who's invested in the success of my campus.
So higher ed, I'm not so familiar with, but with all these technology innovation projects happening, who actually funds these purchases at higher ed?
Yeah, a lot of funding comes from the federal level and state level, and then there are grants available. I know a lot of my collaborators spend a lot of time on grants.gov, and there are web portals for individual states as well that are similar. And, you really have to go find grants. It's not easy. But these days, I think the major players in AI do have programs to help universities get pilot programs going. I hear there are definitely funding available from Google, Microsoft. The big players have funding available. And then some key players in terms of foundations would be names like Lumina, Carnegie Corporation,
Gates.
Spencer Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Those are major players. But there are definitely private grantors as well. So those web portals are very valuable. They have listings of grants available. It takes a lot of effort to be seeking grant regularly to do these projects. And NSF is a big source as well.
I want to come back to HP, the company, a little bit. I think everyone knows about this brand, this company, but I'll admit that I don't know much about this company. Like, to me, HP is the company that sells devices, computers, and also printers, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff. But I'll also say, like, selling computers and printers are probably not considered like sexy these days.
You're right.
Looking at your experience at HP, Jeff, you were the AI technologist at HP. Were there initiatives at HP that tries to connect what the company does, mostly devices, hardware, to AI?
So that's a very good question. HP is not the same as some company like, for example, OpenAI, right? To help a student or faculty, maybe it could be as simple as like renting them some licenses, right? To ChatGPT, for example. For HP, the company has a very interesting background, and a lot of people might not realize this. The founders, Bill and Dave, were actually friends who met at Stanford as graduate students. So they started their company, and they definitely have a very strong roots based in education. And so over the many years, I think the company is over 80 years old, and they've had very close relationships with Stanford and many other universities in terms of collaboration. And when I was there, I had relationships with many universities, many of whom I still keep in touch and have monthly calls. Like, they do go about engaging higher ed in various ways. So for example, I would say, I think it was 2021, we decided to start a HBCU technology conference because one of the sales executives personally had served many HBCUs and noticed there was a need in that many of them were not treated well by technology vendors. And it was a problem where they would be sold a technology service, for example, for one price, and they would go down the street and check with a predominantly white institution. And they would have gotten a better price
and for
exact same thing.
HBCU
Right. It's historically Black college and university. So how we decided to engage that community was to reach out to many faculty members and CIOs at various HBCUs and ask them if they would support us in starting a technology conference built just for them, where we would use our leverage and our connections in the industry and bring experts to speak to their community so that they have access to knowledge and expertise. And also to have vendors come join us who would behave in a very equitable way for this community in the way they do business. The conference was kind of co-created with the help of these stakeholders from the HBCUs. each year the conference grew larger and more impactful. So that was one of the programs I was most proud to be directly involved with. We also do other things to create the connection and be able to do business while doing good. We also had several applied research projects with universities focus on emerging technology. So it's very hard to go in and get people's attention and time if you just say, I want to sell a PC, right? They don't see that as a new problem to be solved. You want to engage them where they are trying to understand a new technology like extended reality, VR, AR, and how that could benefit teaching and learning on campus. So at that time, HP had a product offering for VR, and so we would fund through EDUCAUSE to provide hardware and expertise to help universities research how would we change the way we teach to improve learning outcomes if we had VR headsets and expertise from industry. We also had a similar program focused on AI and machine learning. Again, we granted hardware, powerful HP Z workstations that had multiple GPUs so that students and faculty can do substantial processing right at their desktop. So things like that was how we approach the higher education engagement.
I see. Yeah. Who are the competitors in this space?
Oh, gosh. There are a lot. I mean, there's some are more obvious than others. On campus, I'm sure you see there's a strong preference for Apple devices, right, for laptop. And then there are Dell computers and many varieties of Windows devices, Lenovo, Acer, Asus, commonly available. You know, if you go to Best Buy, anything you see there would be a competitor. It's not very easy to gain market share in higher education just because of that. Some universities, the student devices are not mandated. They just go to Best Buy or order online. Whatever they have, but we focus more on the commercial side where it's institutional purchase for faculty members, for labs, and then for the offices mostly.
And does HB focus mainly on universities, or do you also focus on the, say, K-12 market?
Both. We had, I think, HP was, during the time I was there, was always in the top 3 position, oftentimes first position for K-12. K-12 is interesting because in the US, it mostly concentrated in Chromebooks. Right, from because Google. Of the way they have to do testing. Chromebook from Google, they really created a convenient ecosystem for schools to do that very affordably. So that's definitely a top product. Yeah.
Is there any company or any brand in K-12 or universities takes more than 50% of market share or a large portion of the market share?
Wow, that's a very good question. It varies. Let's put it this way. For K-12 in the US, I would say Chrome is by far the market leader. Just because it's so entrenched, it would be very difficult to replace that. It's not just devices, it's the way devices are managed and the ecosystem of applications that have been, everybody's going to rely. There's very little incentive to change that. Chromebooks are very affordable. They're not necessarily, high margin for the companies that make them. So they have a strong foothold in K-12. I would say in universities, you probably see Apple has pretty high share. The Windows players kind of split the rest. Yeah. Wow. Very fragmented.
When I was in school, I didn't see many Apple around.
Yeah.
It was expensive. It is still expensive.
Yeah, I think my sister and I both went to schools that require you to get Macs. I remember she went to Drexel, so we both went to school in the early 90s, and she had to buy a Macintosh. I also needed to buy a Macintosh. It was not a choice to use PC at that time. In some ways, it's easier to manage for universities if there's support issues, if you standardize on one platform. But I think these days, people do want to have choice. So maybe it's the IT is expected to support all platforms. In the 2010s when BYOD became the norm, everybody expect they should be able to bring their own device, right? So that means shifting from commercial devices to consumer devices, whatever anyone likes. IT, you better figure out how to support it when they plug it into your network. So I think I do sympathize with IT, especially in higher education. In my time at ESET, and we can talk about that, we focus on
what's ESET?
ESET. It's the company I was with before HP. We were focused on endpoint security. So, we had solutions to manage malware on your devices. So we had a lot of data showing which industry was targeted the most. And higher education's always, top of the list because people expect to have freedom.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult for your IT organization to balance freedom of access and security. It's, almost opposites, right? So you have to be able to accomplish both on a very limited budget oftentimes. It's not easy. It's not easy to protect those devices.
Yeah. On my team, both PC and MacBooks are supported and also provided. One thing I noticed is MacBooks usually last longer compared to PCs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can see that because they have control over their hardware. There's not so much variety, among the different PC vendors. And, they have control of the whole ecosystem, their software stack, hardware stack. They've done a really good job in higher education.
Yeah. So we talked about the Chromebooks and that marketing K-12. And Jeff, you were in a similar project that was a collaboration with Alibaba and also Intel with HP.
Yes.
And this was a collaboration between US and China in 2016?
Yes. So I actually joined HP as a contractor for that project to program manage it. It was a very interesting project because leading up to that time, HP had been very successful in the US with Chromebook in K-12 education and was a market leader. At that time, China had a lot of education reform policies in play, and one of which is digitalization of education. So they're also moving to electronic infrastructure, right? So the idea was, well, maybe the same kind of solution could serve China, and the market potential is enormous. We understood that we definitely need a local partner and have a local solution in the stack. So, when I came on board, I was helping to manage this relationship between Alibaba, HP, and Intel. It was very interesting. I learned so much. Yeah.
I definitely want to hear more about that. But before we get into it, I have a few clarifying questions. For this project, who initiated it? Was it HP or was it potentially from the government side? How did it get started?
Yeah, it's been a little while. So I believe HP was the one that initiated it. Intel was in the partnership as they were in almost every program I worked on. They worked very closely with HP education, just because if you look at the ecosystem, right? So HP builds a computer inside. They like the processor to be Intel. So we have that relationship, and they do provide marketing support. And a lot of our programs are funded by strategic partners who are part of the solution, right? So Intel, Microsoft, oftentimes a lot of my projects had support from them, NVIDIA. So depending on what we were pursuing and who is best aligned with those strategic objectives, they may be part of the partnership for that program. So for this particular one, I believe I remember HP initiated it, and they identified at that time Alibaba was very, a top player, not only in cloud computing, which they were achieving something very impressive. I remember at that time they had achieved triple digit growth for 14 quarters in a row, right? So it was very easy for them to stand out as the right partner to integrate with. And they had their own logistics capabilities. At that time, you can look at Alibaba and think, wow, this is at once like Amazon plus Federal Express plus AWS for cloud computing and plus so many things. It just felt like it was the right partner to go in on this project.
What?
Usually, when such project shows its opportunity, comes with certain policy in China. Was there a policy or a push to maybe get every student a Chromebook or similar device, or what was the initial policy pusher?
And what was the target market? Was it K-12 equivalent in China, or were universities also included?
Yeah, so this is where I had a lot of learnings. It was very interesting. It was very fragmented. So I believe the policy didn't go as far as dictate what kind of device and what kind of architecture, right? So we were hoping to propose something that would be seen as a preferred solution because we have something to point to as a success story in the US. Namely, we thought, okay, if you're going to digitalize your education system, that means you need assessment, right? And some kind of standardized assessment that maybe it's national or provincial. There's some hierarchy to it.
What type of assessment is this?
For example, in the US, students regularly have to take certain tests. Like there's some California-based tests, there's some national assessment. So Chromebooks make it very easy to administer those tests. They can be, pushed out and, so we thought if China was digitalizing their education system, something similar probably would be needed. And then here we have something it's proven to work in the US. So we were hoping that it would be a match, right? So China being so big, you just can't go in and try to boil the ocean. You really need to show some initial success with a pilot project. And so we focused on the tier 1 schools where infrastructure is more mature and also allows us to bring focus to the project instead of trying to go everywhere.
Can you define tier 1 schools for us?
Yes. So tier 1 cities, actually. So I misspoke. So we focus on Beijing, Shanghai, and several larger cities where we know the adoption for technology is prevalent and there is sufficient internet or cellular infrastructure because that would be very important to do cloud-based device management or test administration. So that was the thinking behind that.
2016. That was after I was done with school and before I had a kid. So I didn't pay much attention to the whole digitalization reform. What did Chinese government mean when they said that they wanted to digitalize education? What was the big vision?
Part of this was to connect the top teachers who are not evenly distributed, right?
Okay.
So one of the objectives was, if I remember correctly, the policy wanted to make it possible for remote education to be implemented in a way that a famous teacher from one province may be available to students in other places, especially maybe more rural cities where students don't have access to the best teachers, right? There's very little incentive for that to happen. So that was one example. And then also there was a desire to have a lot of education content that can be equally accessible, maybe through a cloud platform, for example. That way, teachers in more, let's say, tier 1 cities who are better resourced could create contents that the rest of the country could leverage. Anybody could contribute to that platform. I forget what it's called, but there was kind of a content bank, if you will, for education resources.
So the goal is to have every student anywhere in China have access to quality education resources. And this project that you were part of is to provide the device for students to be connected to all those resources.
Yes. That was the goal.
I see.
Yeah, because HP, where I was in the company, our objective was definitely to sell more PCs or education device, whatever was defined as the right device form factor for China. We hoped that by entering that market with the right partnership, it could give us huge volume.
Yes.
Right.
At that time, back in 2016, was there a popular brand, PC brand, among students in China?
What was really interesting, and it, was we did a lot of primary research in China in support of this project. We found that the biggest competitor for us was not another PC device.
Oh.
It was really the low price Android tablet.
Low price Android tablet.
So you have to tell us, put into context, how low price was it?
Low price could be like $80.
$80.
It's almost unthinkable to compete with that using a PC, right? However you scale it down, it's just the math doesn't work. The reason for that is tablet at that time was popular because the screen size is bigger than a phone and it's good enough. So really our competitor was good enough. So, and it already works. There are education apps that people are already using, and it's good enough. So that turned out to be quite a challenge to overcome.
Was there a dominant brand for those low price Android tablets?
The problem was they're so pervasive. There are many brands. Many brands. Even though, Google didn't have an official presence there, there's Android compatible devices. There are ways to sideload applications. It was not big enough of a barrier for users, and it just works fine, right? For low cost. So it's, if you try to go in and tell them, well, we have devices in the US that are designed to withstand use, student dropping the laptop from their bag or fall from the desk, no problem, it continues working. And you get to the point where you share the pricing, they're like, our kids are well behaved. We don't need to pay for that premium. The Android tablet is fine. For many schools, it was kind of rude awakening to realize, I think growing up Asian, I remember you have something expensive, your parents put in your hands, you take note. You're not gonna, bring harm to it. And so maybe that was also another cultural difference, that something was seen as a premium feature. It was not really seen as a necessity.
What was the target price range for HP's product? And what was the name for it, for this product?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember the target price, but it was definitely not as low as those Android devices. There is out there a press release announcing a Yun OS.
Okay, so that's the name.
Forget what it's called. Yeah, Yun OS.
Well, that's the
book,
OS.
something like that. Yeah, so we definitely want to leverage that operating system in the name. It was something like Yun OS book, something like that. Yeah.
Yun OS is developed by Alibaba.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe it's still a product now, right?
I think so. I think it was not specifically designed for education use. It was
just
for
an
IoT.
Yeah,
for, I think they have it in automotive products as well. So it's just something that was kind of a flagship operating system from Alibaba.
I see. How far did this project go?
Well, I'll tell you, when Trump was elected and the trade war started, I think things ground to a halt pretty fast. We were already learning about challenges like having to compete with low price Android tablets and other issues. It was already pretty difficult. But when that happened,
Trump's first term.
Wow, yeah, it was very abrupt for me. I mean, I went from traveling to China 1 or twice per quarter to, not doing that because, everything just was stopped. Yeah.
When you were traveling to China, and I suppose you're discussing the deal there and researching the market, what have you noticed about? Because you've been doing product marketing and strategy sales in America for so long. What was different about those meetings?
I think it's for multinationals operating in China. Number one is you really have to listen to your local people, on the ground, right? Because oftentimes your assumptions, the more distance you have from the actual market, the more incorrect your assumptions generally are. So for me, going there regularly was very important, just to talk to the product managers and the business people who are interacting with customers firsthand, to really find out. A lot of times too, as a reflection of our culture, somebody come from far away to meet with you, you tend to be very polite. In general, where Asians are not as forthright about telling you no to your face. So you really have to, again, build relationships with your local colleague to really understand, and do a lot of careful post-mortem from your trips to follow up with them. Like, while I was there with the executives, here's what we heard. Do I interpret it correctly? Is that what you're seeing, right? Because also sometimes they don't feel confident saying certain things when you're there with all the executives. So you really have to build this relationship and understand, like, where are we exactly, and get a clear picture when you're managing a program internationally, especially in China, where it's so nuanced in so many ways. So yeah, that was a big learning for me, going in there to understand the customer needs. We have local colleagues to conduct research, so we have pretty good confidence that we are hearing the customer's voice directly. But then when you have so many players involved in a joint program, that it's very important for you to understand the actual situation, not something that people are trying to be polite to tell you during your visit. So that's why I had to travel there pretty often, and just to really gain an understanding of how things are progressing. And sometimes things can shift very quickly. The decisions made in China are not necessarily all centralized. Each province could have their own standards and objectives, and you have to be sensitive to that. When you do a pilot project, they may have their own goals and objective in working with a multinational company or a famous local company like Alibaba, right? So you don't feel the same level of clarity and confidence that you might compared to, let's say, I'm doing the same program here in the US. I think for that program, it was quite a bit of effort just to make sure you know where you stand at all times. Wow. And sometimes it's not super clear.
Yeah. Even for you as ethnicity Asian, you also found it very difficult.
That was also very nuanced because, so Asian is one thing, but then I'm Chinese, Taiwan born, American naturalized citizen. So I had to fill out some extra paperwork several times. Also try to be very sensitive and, aware of that when I'm there and managing this program. There may be other things at play that I did not realize at first. But that being said, I had, it was such a great experience working on that program and related programs in China. I got to go to Forbidden City. We have meetings there on site with party leaders, and
wow,
that's not something that's easy to gain access to. And just meeting with several startup local in Beijing was very eye-opening to see. I think the startup culture in China is not necessarily the same here, right? Like when people say they have work-life balance, they mean they're still working 9 to 9, 6 days, and that's work-life balance. And that's,
Speaking of 996, recently read an article on LinkedIn saying that 996 has arrived in San Francisco. But I realized that the 996 that they are envisioning, like the ones in San Francisco in Bay Area are envisioning, is different from the 996 in China.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my gosh.
So it was HP trying to do business in a foreign market. But in addition to that, that was also a collaboration among three giant corporations, HP, Alibaba, and Intel. How did you navigate through it?
I think a lot of preparations, just understanding the number of people involved, certainly gets multiplied, right? And just understanding how everybody can come out a winner in this partnership and just really making them confident that you understand it.
Mhm.
People are dedicating serious resources, so you have to be very respectful of that. So for me, we have definitely regular meeting cadences for program management, and I always try to make sure I have the notes ready right after each call, so that also respecting the time difference, that they have what they need to negotiate on our behalf or the program's behalf with their upper management whenever we need escalation or resources, or to leverage their relationship to start a pilot project. For example, it's not, I had to kind of make sure that I was informed so that I can explain to not just my management, but also Intel as well, whenever there are unforeseen circumstances or why are things taking longer, and you have to understand how things work in China. The relationships they are using may not be what you're used to here. And then starting something new, there's definitely also opportunity costs, right? They take time away from selling what they can sell today to help you grow something new. There's a cost to that. I think for me, just being respectful of all the players involved and understand how that when you assign action items, that you think about how to close that loop to make sure they're getting what they need and not just to advance your own agenda. Yeah.
Jeff, you shared with me a story from this project. Very fascinating story showing the cultural differences between US and China. Is that something that you would like to share on our podcast?
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of nuances in Asia, not just in China. I think we're not, top of mind. And so there was an instance where HP did a huge amount of business with JD,
Jingdong.
Jingdong, for, I believe, their gaming device was quite popular. And I think normally one would think, well, of course, I'll prioritize visiting that customer or partner. But while we were trying to build something new with Alibaba, I think they took offense, and it was not intentional. They took offense that, well, your CEO is in our country, and why were we not prioritized? There's also the complication that those two companies are competitors.
Yeah, competitors in the
right, for
e-commerce.
e-commerce, right? And so things like that, I think, are just valuable lessons learned for multinationals, right? I mean, on the other hand, although I was managing the program, I didn't necessarily have full view of our CEO's comings and goings, or certainly I don't influence his schedule. But I think valuable learning from that was when you go to a country that may have different culture, different expectations of hierarchy, that you definitely need to kind of be plugged in to understand who's doing what at a much higher level, down to like, should you be arriving at this airport that's closer to this partner or that? And the order of meetings create a lot of sensitivities that some people might look at it and go, oh, that's kind of petty, or they don't understand why it matters. But it certainly mattered. I was getting text messages in the middle of the night.
Ooh.
It's like, yeah. So, yeah.
Was it hard to explain to your other coworkers about these nuances to let even understand it?
I think they were definitely open to it. They didn't see it coming. So it was more reactive. After the fact, something happens, it will be a learning, right? Also, I think something that's prevalent, I think and it still bothers me in the US after all these years, it's like, if you want to have a relationship with a country or a company in that country or people of that culture, you have to invest some minimum level effort to learn to pronounce their names correctly, right? So I don't think we're quite there with China. And there's just so many, there were some couple times that we had to be reminded, like, can you please tell so-and-so on the call, correct pronunciation of our executive is this versus that. We know this is how you guys pronounce there, but it's also like the pronunciation of Wang, right? W-A-N-G. A lot of people go Wang.
Yeah.
And then, and people understand from China that sometimes it's used as a joke, right? In the US, that same word. So like they do take offense, learn how to pronounce it correctly.
Yeah.
Or like these days, in the news, Jensen Huang, I hear a lot of times on news programs pronouncing as Wang for some strange reason. Well, it's not even the same word. So I think there's still a lot of culture differences, and maybe intentional or unintentional. It comes across as disrespectful when you don't know how to pronounce people's names. Right? So I think that's something to be worked on.
I'd like to add that this is not specific to Chinese. It's just people here in the US is generally bad with foreign languages.
Yeah, but I think...
But doing business is different though.
Yeah, doing business is different. And then I think it would be good to kind of develop awareness to like just ask, right? Because everybody likes their name to be pronounced correctly.
Another phenomenon I've seen, I'm not sure if you are also saw that when you're in China, is a lot of foreigners coming to China, they will assume the other party don't understand English that well.
Oh.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, even if the Chinese don't speak good English or they are just relatively quiet, their English could be very, very good.
Yeah, comprehension is definitely very high.
Yeah,
right?
so whatever you're saying, they totally understand it. And
Yeah.
but there's no awareness just because the person is not speaking that much or doesn't show their English ability. They will act not in a way that,
That reminds me, there was one time a few years ago when I was in Shanghai at a bar. There were just a couple, I think they were Americans, and they just started speaking very loud in English, but speaking ill of Chinese. They're right behind me.
in Shanghai.
In Shanghai.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and
that's
I started to talk in English to my friends.
Good for you.
Yeah, I think Americans often have, a lot of them have this problem, but I often find like Asian seniors come to the US have the same problem. They will like comment on the US on the street. I'm like, a lot of people here can understand Mandarin.
Especially in California.
Especially in California. And they are not aware. They're like, oh, I'm in America. Like, how come like I can't speak Mandarin and comment on things? People won't understand me, but it's not true. Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to bring us back to the education landscape in the US. So we talked about like the impact that Trump has made to education in his first term, and now in his second term, we have also seen a lot of changes in education.
Yes.
Jeff, do you want to share your observations?
Yeah, my observation is it's really unfortunate that I think there have been actions taken seemingly without considering the consequences, right? Certainly looks that way. I have a lot of friends and colleagues from when I was doing the higher education programs whose research programs were just abruptly cut when funding was withheld earlier this year, right? So to the extent I had one colleague, he was just down to 2 more interviews. I mean, 2 weeks of work left to finish a year-long study, but funding was cut. And so he could have lost all of that work had he not been able to get private funding to help him just wrap up the project. And the project was on kind of the effect of miscommunication, disinformation, and misinformation in the age of AI was the focus on the research. So yeah, very unfortunate. I've also heard some schools, they have taken a different approach. The programs that were cut are kept alive by other programs sharing their funding. So everybody spread the pain, kind of like that. But I think that the problem is just things were done what seems like arbitrary decision, right? And there are people that are definitely affected. A lot of researchers or faculty rely on that funding, and when there's no funding, they don't get paid and they lose their jobs. So it's not a joke. Also, the rolling back DEI has definitely had impact on campuses, right? And many corporations as well. It's unfortunate. I mean, sometimes there may be waste, sometimes there may be inefficiency, and you may be able to cut things, but in a thoughtful way. When it's just kind of random, we are worse off for it. Cutting things like funding for NSF, which is funding a lot of basic research efforts that could yield amazing things in healthcare or technology or what have you, things we can't anticipate today until they take a more mature form, right? But if you cut the funding today, you never reap the benefits of it, and you don't know what those would have been. So I think it's just a very chaotic time for higher education. And then the impact on immigration, definitely, international student enrollment is impacted and down. Maybe a lot of people don't realize they pay sticker price, international students, and they subsidize other students to be able to receive aid or discounted tuitions, right? So you take that away, then, well, everybody else needs to pay more. Just simple math. So I think it's been a very difficult time for universities, even if they're not the ones appearing in the news being targeted in a more direct way with lawsuits for hundreds of millions of dollars or billions. I think higher education collaborate across institutions so much. There are probably ripple effects we don't realize beyond what's obvious. You cut a program, you lose a faculty member. They may have been involved in other collaborations with different campuses. Now you've missed the opportunity to see the fruit of that collaboration, or maybe because of that, things fall like a series of dominoes. It affects other campus as well because the project's no longer viable without that one person. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that actions have been taken in such a callous way.
There's a big price that we will need to pay for this in the long term. In the short term, with all the funding cuts across higher education, how does that affect companies like HP?
Yeah, I think not being there anymore, but if we look at how workforce development goes, right, the talent pipeline, if education is impacted negatively and your talent pipeline is not what you think it will be, it will definitely impact industry when they need to seek to hire graduates in various fields that are advanced in STEM areas or healthcare, and across all disciplines. You don't fill the pipeline, you're not going to get what you expect on the other end of the pipeline. It's just that simple. And the international students and graduate students perform many functions, right? And many of them are teaching assistants, many of them become professors. So it's not just like, oh, we have fewer students this term. They could have the potential to become future instructors, future researchers, contributing in different ways in academia. So I think for my former employer and other companies in the industry, I think this will definitely impact them. Maybe some immediate impact, but I think, like you said, there will be long-term negative impact we'll feel from this because so many things are like pipelines. It's not that you can turn it on and it's filled immediately. It takes years for people to progress through the pipeline. So if it's interrupted, it will be felt later down the line.
So Jeff, you started working tech around 1996, right? So it's about 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you worked in semiconductor when you first joined tech.
Yeah. Going back a couple years before that, I started doing some software engineering as an intern as well. So started actually in software first. I had my first internship was with Honeywell, industrial control systems. It was, I think, out of high school. But coming out of graduate school, my first job was in semiconductor with Qualcomm doing satellite communications. I worked on
in
a
San
chip
Diego.
In San Diego. Yeah, I escaped from the icy Pittsburgh climate to San Diego. So I was working on the demodulator chip for the ground station for the Global Star satellite communications project.
Yeah, so over the last 30 years, Jeff, you experienced the 2000 dot-com bubble and also the financial crisis in 2008 and also like various waves of AI in the tech world.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be interesting for us to hear from you what your experience was like. Like starting from the very beginning, before 2000, you did internship in software engineering. Was software engineering a thing back then?
Software engineering was, I think, coming into a discipline. I think while I was studying at Carnegie Mellon, there was a software engineering institute. So they were already defining, different levels of maturity for software engineering and what have you. So it was definitely coming, shape was taking form. So what was really interesting, though, I focused on circuit design for semiconductors. And while I was working on my master's project, I was designing a network switch on semiconductor. But the best tool we had available then was to basically draw polygons, 4 layers of polygons representing the design of the transistor. So I spent about 9 months drawing these polygons for my chip. So what's interesting, and this kind of sets up the story for technology transformation, right? So at that time, in industry, they were already using better tools. When I graduated, to design what I had to design by hand by drawing polygons, I simply just had to write code. And to replicate what I had done for, it was like 9 to 12 months, it was very simple, just maybe 2 weeks of work. Writing code, and then there are tool sets to take the code and generate the circuitry in certain representation that you can simulate to make sure it's correct before you commit it to manufacturing. And so I thought at that time, wow, things are progressing so fast and now we can do so much more, right? So in a way, every time there's technology transformation, there's some amount of fear, right? People think, well, I just invested all this time learning how to draw these polygons into transistors. What's going to happen to my job? But, on the other hand, hey, good news, you don't have to do that anymore. You just write code. Now you learn a new set of skills with new tool sets. What comes with is productivity that gives you also elevated level of working where as you were preoccupied with aligning polygons so the colors show up correctly and you don't create design rule violations. Now you don't think on that level. Now you think architecturally, right? And you write the code and you can design things much quicker. So from there, I spent almost 10 years doing circuit design. So what I found after doing that for about 10 years was it feels like baking different flavors of cakes, but the recipe is pretty much the same, or the process to do it is pretty much the same. And so I wanted to change the trajectory of my career. Yeah.
What were you doing during .com bubble?
.com bubble, oh boy. So after Qualcomm, I moved to Silicon Valley. It was 96 to 97 to 98. I finally got to about around 1999. I got a little bit burned out doing chip design. I took a little bit of time off. And of course, every day, those days in Silicon Valley, you hear on the news, they tell you, today, there's X number of people in Silicon Valley that become millionaires, right? Because such and such company has increased in value. And it was just a very unreal time. Everybody knew somebody who's made so much money doing something.com. And then at the same time, everybody was feeling like, of course, it will not last, but it's not going to bust right now because I'm here in the center of things and I hear things, right? So that's what happens when you're in Silicon Valley. And a lot of times it feels like you're right because you will hear things and you see things and they're not widely known outside of that area. And maybe 6 months later, you hear it reported in some tech news or something. It feels like you're on the inside. You can see it coming. But, so at that time, I was a little bit burned out. So I actually stopped doing engineering for a while. I started trading stock options because I was curious about it. And I said, well, I have some savings. Let me try it. So how I kind of felt the .com bubble burst was through trading. Because at that time, for the stocks that I followed, there was definitely a very well-defined rhythm, right? It will go up in a certain number of days, and then it will drop, and it goes back up. And then I think there was early 2000, all of a sudden, that pattern changed, and things became very chaotic. I think I know a lot of things. I don't. I said to myself, I am going to cash out at this moment and see what happens. And then, sure enough, not too long after that, it was just bloodbath. It's just the bubble burst. And it went from an environment where any day, if you're not happy with your job, you can probably go down the street and get a new job. At the height of the .com era, to after the bubble burst, it was really ugly. It was just,
Share the glory, like what did you trade on? Just to enlighten us with the...
Well, I have to say, I wish I can go back to that time. I think I would do so much better because I was just bumbling around and learning things. And at the same time, it was relatively new for retail traders to have access to options trading. So the quotes were not particularly fast. Execution was not good. There was sometimes huge slippage for slippage, meaning you set a price and then the difference between your desired price and what actually could get executed could be sometimes very wide. And so, I was trading internet stocks. Of course, I think the one I did quite well with, that time there's a stock, the symbol was CMGI. I think it was a holding company of several leading internet companies at that time. So it kind of had a huge leverage effect, when things were going well, it was really going fast up. And then when things stopped going right, it dropped like a rock. I was very lucky to learn in that environment when you really, really have to mess up not to make money. Before the bust, had I known all the stuff I have learned, like if I go back to that environment, I can, with my knowledge and hindsight, and make a lot more money because I didn't know as much as I thought I did. But still, I was very grateful I cashed out in time, and it was just horrible after that.
So talking from a trading perspective, do you think it's any different today?
Today, it also feels like there's a bubble, but with certain differences. And also structurally, I feel like specific to options trading is not as bad as during that time in the late 1999. The executions are much better. The commissions either zero or very low. trading volume is much higher, so you do get better execution today. If you know what you're doing compared to trying to do the same thing back then, you would come out ahead just because you're not paying a lot of fees. I remember, doing those trades, each contract, the commission may be like $35. Now it's not hard for you to find, to open an account where there's zero cost to trade. But today also feels like certain stocks are so lofty.
Right.
But I think the major difference is back then, it was really different in the sense that some companies were operating with no business model, right? They're just like, we'll do this long enough and it will make sense. We just keep making money somehow. And people say, okay, take my money, right? But today, if you look at AI, certainly there are examples where you can point to and say, yes, there's crazy amount of money, like tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars going in. Not everybody is making a profit, but you can point to outcome from the AI that is actually productive and doing things versus completely made up hope, right? I'll give you an example. I know that these companies are probably not profitable with these products yet, but if you look at a product like Anthropic's Claude Code, right? I've used it, I really made a point to learn it probably almost 2 months ago. And what I've been able to do with it, I mean, it's truly just transformational, right? I remember the project I was working on at HP, right? There were only 2 developers, it was me and a principal data scientist. And then sometime we needed front-end AI designer, and he was a very scarce resource. And so sometimes he became the bottleneck and we can't make any progress. With tools like Claude Code, I still don't know how to do front-end design, but guess what? I know how to express my requirement and then have it go do it and test it by itself by taking screenshots and determining whether it has satisfied my requirements, and it can iterate on that. So things like that makes me think, yes, it feels like a bubble, but it's a different type of environment, different type of situation than the .com disaster. But it does feel like we are maybe running a little bit too fast in some ways.
That's reassuring in a sense.
Yeah.
But taking from a different angle, if we look at US stock market, everything's going very well. But if we look around, there are companies doing mass layoffs, juniors, especially in tech, cannot find a job. There is this disparity between the reality that we're living in and the stock market. How do we make sense of it?
Yeah, that is a great point. I don't know the answer. I feel like there's a transformation right now happening. And that is maybe hard to see because we are in it right now. Maybe with the distance of a little more time, 3 months, 6 months, we may see it better. And what I mean is, you look at these mass layoffs and CEOs being so gleeful about, look at our quarterly performance, and it's unfortunate that it's tied to these mass layoffs and they claim it's productivity gain from AI, what have you. And I don't know if that's representative of wide range of companies right now. I feel like for a lot of companies, they still haven't adopted AI. And for some companies, they will see the productive gain as a competitive advantage. Not everybody's going to choose to use AI to save on headcount. Some may be more strategic and say, well, it's great that with some training, 1 employee can give me an output of 5, let's say. And they will choose to invest in that training. And then if you look in any market, if one competitor chooses to make that investment and have this huge gain in productivity compared to another competitor who decided, well, I'm going to use AI to save on headcount, I think the outcome could be very different. And if their competitive advantage comes from investing in AI to reap the productivity gains, I think we'll see the workforce transformation one way. If everybody decides, oh, I'm just going to cut costs because there's so much confusion. I don't know how to run my business with tariffs on one day, off another day. Let me just hunker down. Let me use AI and see how much headcount I can cut for now. Well, then it'll go another way. So I think it's very difficult to tell right now, but I think in a few more months, we'll have a better idea because it seems that the full effect of the tariffs are not felt yet or well understood because there was a lot of stocking up before building up inventory, I believe. And I think in a few more quarters, we'll see maybe more clearly what the impact is. And then different industries will be impacted differently, right? So I think if you're a software company, probably you're not going to be impacted as much as a company that does in manufacturing, have a complex supply chain to manage. And so I think it's not going to all be felt evenly, but I think AI is making huge progress in a lot of different areas. So I would love to reconnect in 6 months and let's see what the landscape looks like together at that time.
Should people who got laid off or is unsure, because the environment is unsure, should they just go trade?
My approach has been, I was really frustrated because when I started looking for a job in June, it's not what I had anticipated. And you'll see this story repeated so many times on LinkedIn. You're very diligent. You wake up, you look at the job openings, and you apply. You do tailor your resume to the job. You do diligent follow-up, and then you're ghosted. Nothing comes back. It seems like doesn't matter how qualified you are. That's kind of the current landscape. And
that is also what you have experienced, Jeff, as someone with 30 years of experience.
Yes. Yes, unfortunately. And so what I discover is a lot of people share stories like, well, you have to know somebody. Right now, it's all depending on networking because there's so much confusion. You don't know if a job posting is just there for window dressing. Sometimes it's posted for only a couple hours, it disappears, and it reappears a couple weeks later, same job listing. So what I decided after realizing, I was wasting my time doing that was I realized I wanted a job that is AI plus. What I mean is I like to be aligning my career at the intersection of different technologies. So AI plus education or AI plus healthcare or what have you. So to do that, I focus my time on online learning. There is unbelievable amount of resources these days compared to when the dot-com bubble burst, right? That's just objective fact. If you're somebody who wants to upskill and learn, you just have to do it. Tools are there. First thing I did was I signed up for the $20 a month plan with Google to gain access to Gemini, which also included Notebook LM, which is a great tool if you like to learn. So every day I will go do some research, deep research using Gemini, and it does a fantastic job. Everything comes back with full references, citations of source. And then you can put it into Notebook LM and you can have a conversation with it and you can learn so much using that tool. And then you can have it, if you don't like to read, you can have it create an audio overview like a podcast so you can listen to. And then you can then go back and figure out where you want to do deep dive. And I found that to be a great way to upskill. And so for people who are in the tech field, I think especially software related, or if you're a product manager, I feel like you really need to invest time understanding these AI coders and get a firsthand understanding of what they can do. Then you'll get a better sense for how it might impact your job and your career path. I think those are productive things to do if you find yourself suddenly without a job and you applying to lots of applications that are not yielding results. I think it's great to take control of your own learning and upskilling. And because you have a lot of things that inform you, because the job listings tell you what kind of skills they're looking for, and you can use some pretty good AI learning aids to help you learn new things very quickly and gain new skills. And then I think it feels like we need to wait a little bit for the companies to figure out how they operate in this new reality. Then I think perhaps hiring will become more stable.
When I asked you, like, should people just go trade, it wasn't really kidding. Because right now, and you kind of did that just before the dot-com bubble. Do you still think there's a lot of value in building a career, like a long-term career? Or should we just invest in the upside? And then it might sound opportunistic, but right now with AI in our hands, it almost kind of makes sense that we should just trade all day because that will have more upside, right? Or is that just short-term thinking?
I think, that's a very good point, Amy. I think you could be pretty successful at trading today because you have access to much more information, right? And even taking the standpoint of if you learn how to use the AI tools to help you do fundamental analysis of the companies you're interested in, you can probably do it 100 times better than if you didn't have that tool, right? You can very easily write a prompt and it'll go analyze, it will do competitive analysis of this company against its competitors and adjacent markets. I've done that a bunch of times when I have nothing else to do. And it's just amazing the reports it comes back with it within minutes. And then if you leverage that, you can probably be a better stock picker than you could anytime before, right? Because if you just go by feeling, and you're probably going to lose your money pretty soon. But you have a foundation of legitimate research and analysis to inform you, you can probably make better trading decisions. Or, I think probably a lot of people are doing just buying NVIDIA these days and kind of ride the coattail. It's probably not a ridiculous idea to invest in the growth of AI, right? Even if you just say, I buy some shares in these companies and watch what happens if you do believe, there's so many people say, AI is the new electricity, right? I mean, it does feel that way. It has the potential to transform so many industries positive.
I face that dilemma because when I'm asked by younger people about building a career, I'm more traditional. I still think building a career is way more valuable long term, and trading stocks being your main thing is not what I want to do all day. But it's becoming increasingly hard to persuade people building a career is the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think I'm more like you, Amy. I think building a career is still important, but I think what a career looks like may change. I think I'm older than both of you. I'm 53, and you look at my career, I kind of have several pivots. And that's another thing that I found a little bit difficult this time around finding my next job is, I was very fortunate at HP where I had a role that allowed me to use most of my skills. So technical business, you have to know about how sales happen. You have to know how marketing happens. And so everything I've done in my career, I could bring to bear at my last role, right? And so it's very difficult for me to go out and say, well, let me find another one of this, right? It doesn't really exist. You kind of have to land somewhere, prove yourself, and let them see you have those capabilities. Then you have a role where you can use all your skills. It has been a struggle for me to say, okay, if an opportunity comes up that only use part of my skill set, do I pigeonhole myself at this age by taking that choice today? Or do I, and maybe this is the universe guiding me, currently I'm doing product marketing, but only part-time. I have capacity to do other things. I could very easily at this stage of my career to say, yes, okay, I like to explore the healthcare industry, but from the standpoint of applying AI. I have the bandwidth to do that. So I could do that, but only because I have invested in 30 years building my career, even counting the different pivots to understand okay, for a company to succeed, there's going to be people who build products. There's going to be people who define products by understanding the customer requirements. There are people who know how to create demand for the product. There are people who go out and make money so everybody gets paid. And so I think it is still very important for young people to understand, as chaotic as things look today, you should plan to have a long, productive working persona that you are curating, right? And to do that, you should think about how you want to build your career. And it might not be one thing for the entirety of your working history. It could be like me. You do something for X amount of time, you get the maximum value you can out of it, and you can build on that and pivot. And then they could be additive as you make the pivots. And so I think, Amy, I think you're right. I think it would be tremendous loss if students look at the current environment and go, I don't know what to do. I mean, put all my money in this stock and be done with it, right? Because not many people make money that way.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. And I definitely see the value of building up options. If not for the 30 years of work experience, you don't have the different options you have now. And one of the options is trading for you. So you didn't lose that either. Yeah. Stella and I are in our 30s. And when we're just in mid-career, kind of building up family, what do you suggest we do? Or what were you like at our age?
Yeah. I think, for me, every time I took a pivot, I learned something new. And one thing I noticed for me, and maybe this is true of many Asian Americans, maybe more so my generation, because when I was growing up, you're always told to be compliant, right? 当一个乖孩子, right? You follow all the rules and do what you're supposed to. And I feel like that has its place, in a place that's very densely populated. You can see that some value to that. But I noticed as I grew up here and go through my working life, I noticed that I was not particularly skilled at making small talk. Turns out that is a very important skill in the US. How to present your accomplishments to your colleagues and your managers is very important, especially in larger companies. And don't assume people know, right? You don't have to do it in an obnoxious way, but you should be your own promoter. So I think in my 30s, I had just made the pivot, early 30s, to go from the technical side. I had just left Pittsburgh for a company in San Diego. And the context was I was there for one startup and they had this mass layoff. All the hardware guys got laid off overnight because of a systemic change. It was in response to the 9/11 attack. Our business, which was originally focused on hardware acceleration, so very performance-based, to one that the customers prioritize something different overnight, which is resilience, because they were unfortunately victims of the attack very directly, and they saw that their data centers were destroyed and they need resilience much more than performance. So I had started a company with a couple colleagues, but we couldn't get funding in Pittsburgh. And I noticed there's almost an exact company doing exact same thing here in San Diego that was well funded. It was a spin out from the Intel Network Equipment Division, and they were already positioned to sell their products. So I seized that opportunity, right? So I think in your 30s, it's not bad to kind of broaden your horizon a little bit. I went from someone who had designed a product that we couldn't get funding to go to market with, but I found a company that has the same product, is ready to go to market, and I pitched myself to be a salesperson for them because I had the advantage of knowing how difficult it is to sell it to a customer and the following integration that's involved for them to scale up the adoption. So I told them that would be my advantage being a sales guy. So I think if you're in your 30s, you've kind of developed your craft for some time and you're open to looking at adjacencies, I think that's a great thing to do in your 30s because you can pick a direction, spend a few years. If it happens to not be fruitful, you can go back to what you were doing very easily. And I think that gets harder in later stages of your career because people do value track record, and you have to be careful about choosing your pivots, that they're additive and they're not going to reset every time and bring you back to where you were a beginner. So I think my suggestion is in your 30s, open your eyes to becoming a T-shaped person. That means, you have this crossbar, you should be very aware of adjacencies and neighboring domains and develop more skills. And, you already have the one depth, probably almost 10 years in your career by that time, and you can pick another place to build the depth. And I think the more you're able to fill in those spaces with expertise, the more valuable you become, because you don't just know some surface level knowledge about how things work. You actually have deep understanding of how one thing impacts another. And, whether you become an entrepreneur, start your own company, or you end up working for a large company, I think those are very valuable skills.
Right now, my struggle is I'm not sure if all my decision on new experience will be additive. Yeah. Yeah. In my 20s, I think nothing, like all experience will be additive. And then in my 30s, I start to be more cautious. I start thinking about a new experience and wonder if this will be additive. Or as we become more busy with other responsibilities, I start to think, okay, is this valuable for me to spend time on? Is it additive enough for me to do this under another new thing? Yeah, so your advice has been very helpful.
Yeah. And I think also invest in networking. That came to me relatively late because I'm more of an introvert. It doesn't come natural to me. Even though some of my jobs, particularly the sales position, I really had to make myself do that. So I think networking is also going to become much more important going forward, just because the job market changes, right? The more people you know kind of builds in more of a sense of security. Either you hear things to give you a heads up on what's happening, or, they may open doors for you that you didn't realize were there before. If things have shifted right under your feet, right? And then you find yourself in a position. So I would definitely also advise younger career people to really invest in networking, make it something you do regularly, and then so that it will pay dividend later.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for coming on our podcast. This is our second English episode, and we hope to have more in the future.
Oh, thank you. It's such a delight to spend time with you. I'm honored to be invited.
Thank you, Jeff.
Stella and Amy's podcast, we have a Mandarin version, which will update every other week. And we will do this English podcast every so often. Please follow us on Substack. Our Substack is called The Cocoons by Stella and Amy. And thank you for listening.